Hello, my dear friends, and in this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the past 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. First, let's talk about the United States of America. A very interesting statement was made by the former President of the United States, Donald Trump. He hinted that he spoke to Putin, but not about the disaster in Washington. When asked if he spoke to President Putin about the plane crash, he clarified, "No, not about that. You know that when talking about Donald Trump, he has a lot of things to do right now. He is very busy, and to tell the truth, for the first time probably since 2018 or maybe 2020, I noticed that Donald Trump looks very tired. He is exhausted, maybe not just because he has many tasks and meetings, but because he understands how much he must accomplish in the next 4 years. Sometimes, when you look into his eyes, it seems he realizes that he may not be able to complete everything he is planning. It is a very difficult situation for him. Now, let's move to Ukraine. We have many interesting statements about Ukraine, including those made by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. For example, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated that President Donald Trump's position is that the war in Ukraine should end with negotiations. However, any negotiations require consent from both sides. Neither Ukraine nor Russia will be able to achieve their maximalist goals as a result of the war. This is not going to end with one side or the other achieving everything they want. There is a lot of hard work to be done, and I believe only the United States, under the leadership of President Trump, can make that happen. It is not going to be easy, it will take some time, but I know he is committed to getting there. Another important statement made by Secretary of State Rubio is that Ukraine has been set back 100 years as a result of the war with Russia. Ukraine's energy system has been destroyed. Who will have to pay to restore all this? How many Ukrainians have left Ukraine and now live in other countries? They may never return, and Ukraine's future is at risk, according to the Secretary of State. As you can see, Trump's team understands that there is no bright future for Ukraine. As of now, it would be better to stop this war as soon as possible. The United States of America may be doing everything they can to stop the war and prevent further casualties. However, when talking about the European Union, we see that they are trying to support Ukraine and prolong this war. For example, today, we received reports that Sweden is providing another $1.2 billion aid package to Ukraine. The government is in talks with suppliers in Sweden and Europe to supply priority equipment such as artillery and drones. I saw the list and it is very extensive. Obviously, it will allow the Ukrainians to hold their positions for another few months. Another important fact is that one day of war in 2024 costs Ukraine approximately $136.6 million, a significant amount. The total funding from international partners for 2022 to 2024 amounts to $150 billion. This figure covers only economic aid. We are not even talking about military assistance. The situation for Ukraine is very critical. Most importantly, there is no stability along the line of combat contact, where the fighting continues. The Russians continue their offensive operation. For example, when talking about the Andriivka fortified area, another day has brought a significant number of icons around the entire pocket. The Russians are advancing, trying to encircle the Ukrainians, and most likely, they will be able to do so. First, let's talk about Konstantinovka. We received several reports from Russian sources, including very reliable ones, stating that the Russian armed forces entered the eastern part of Andriivka, west of Klishchivka. Additionally, Russian assault forces are attacking south of Konstantinovka, and if successful, they could form a cauldron for the Ukrainian armed forces. Later, we got some clarifications on how exactly the Russians are attacking. According to the current information, the Russians are trying to advance into the southeastern part of the settlement, specifically targeting these farms. There is a very powerful stronghold held by the Ukrainian side in this area. If the Russians manage to take this stronghold under complete control, they will be able to shorten the distance between this fortified area, this cauldron, and the main supply road to less than 1 kilometer. The bridges along the Siversky Donets River have already been destroyed, but the Russians may have managed to build several pontoon bridges. In that case, this territory would be under complete Russian fire control. We have also observed some changes in the eastern part of Andriivka. Once again, several sources reported that the Russians entered the village from the east. Based on reports from different pro-Russian sources, we have adjusted the map accordingly and marked certain areas as contested. When looking at the broader picture, the Russians are trying to attack from multiple directions, attempting to encircle the Ukrainians in the territory of Chasiv Yar and Bohdunivka. Furthermore, today, Ukrainian sources published a video showing their forces withdrawing from the southern part of this pocket. In the video, we can see how the Russians were maneuvering and redeploying their forces from one area to another during nighttime, while the Ukrainians bombed them using FPV drones. One particular episode took place exactly in this area. Based on the footage, we have adjusted the map in favor of the Russians. This was the situation as of January 30th. By January 31st, reports continued to confirm that the Russians were advancing in the territory of Chasiv Yar. Currently, we don't see major changes on the ground, but sources indicate that heavy clashes are ongoing. The main objective of the Russians is to pin down the Ukrainians and prevent them from escaping the encirclement further west towards the settlement of Ivanivsk. Most likely, another 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers could be encircled here. Now, let's move further and discuss the situation in the Avdiivka direction. According to available information, as a result of their offensive operations, the Russians have managed to establish control over approximately 50% of the settlement of Nevelsk. This conclusion is based on video footage published by the Ukrainian side. The 59th Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces released footage showing Ukrainian drones flying over the settlement and targeting Russian forces in this specific area. Based on the footage, we have updated the map. This area was previously considered a contested zone, but we now have no doubts that the Russians have taken control of the southern part of the settlement. Different pro-Russian sources have also reported that the northwestern part of Nevelsk has been captured by Russian forces. However, for now, we will wait for further confirmation, as there may still be some pockets of Ukrainian resistance. Regardless, it is clear how the battle for Nevelsk is going to end. As for the Marinka direction, over the past 24 hours, we have not received any new updates from the line of combat contact. The Russians are regrouping right now, at least the last few days indicate this. For example, we didn't receive any updates from this area yesterday, nor have we received anything today, at least not by the morning of January 31st. Maybe throughout the day, we will get more information, but for now, all signs point to an ongoing regrouping process. Ukrainian sources published a video from the eastern flank of the Pisky direction. In this video, we can see another Russian attempt to advance towards Konstantinovka. The Russians used a significant number of armored vehicles, infantry fighting vehicles, and personnel carriers. They were attacking Ukrainian positions while the Ukrainians attempted to slow them down using a large number of FPV drones. One of the episodes took place at this exact location, after which the Ukrainians stopped publishing updates on the further progress of the Russian armed forces. However, it is evident that the Russians were moving in a northwestern direction, either towards the N32 road or in the direction of the settlement of Bahatyr. Let's wait and see. Most likely, the Russians have improved their positions, but as of now, we do not have definitive proof. Now, let's discuss the situation in the city of Torsky. Once again, another source has reported that the city of Torsky has now been fully captured by Russian forces. This statement was made by some pro-Russian, reliable sources, though without any concrete evidence. Perhaps the Ministry of Defense will confirm this later today. As for Chervonopopivka, according to the latest information, the Russians have managed to improve their positions and enter the eastern part of the settlement. A video shows how a Ukrainian FPV drone attacked an abandoned Russian infantry fighting vehicle on the eastern outskirts. The vehicle was damaged and ultimately destroyed. Some sources initially suggested that the Russians were advancing from the western part, while others indicated they were attacking from the east. It was difficult to determine the exact direction. However, based on the way the infantry fighting vehicle was positioned, we adjusted the map to reflect that the Russians were indeed attacking from the east. Now, let's compare the situation on the map between different dates. This was the situation by the end of January 30th, and this is how it looked at the beginning of January 31st. Based on this, we believe that Russian forces from the Zabolotivka microdistrict attacked the Ukrainians from the eastern flank, aiming to encircle those currently positioned in these fields. It is highly likely that the Russians have managed to create another cauldron in this area. The coming days will be decisive for the Ukrainians. Either they will need to counterattack or retreat further north. We expect that the Ukrainians will retreat because they lack the necessary forces and have no chance of counterattacking the Russians in this area. Now, let's turn to the situation in Chervenopopivka. The Russians are encircling the central part of the city. Today, pro-Russian sources updated their maps once again, favoring the Russian side, showing that the northernmost part of Chervenopopivka is now under full Russian control. We can compare the maps. By the end of January 30th, several Russian sources had reported that Ukrainian forces had regained control over this territory. However, now, a completely different picture is emerging, indicating that the Russians have retained their presence there and that previous reports from January 30th were merely wishful thinking. Now, let's move on and discuss the situation in the Sudza direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operations. We are receiving numerous updates from the area of Sinkivka. Over the past 24 hours, we received another batch of videos showing Russian forces attacking and destroying Ukrainian tanks and vehicles, which the Ukrainians had attempted to hide in the forest. In one of these videos, we can see another Ukrainian infantry fighting vehicle that was damaged and destroyed by the Russians. Currently, the Russians are conducting an active assault on Sinkivka, while the Ukrainians are trying to counterattack from the south by striking the Russian flanks. As a result, most of Ukraine's recent losses have occurred in the Sumy region. Something tells me that in the very near future, the village of Sinkivka will fall into Russian hands. Once that happens, the Russians will be able to advance further towards Sudza. We are now approaching a very decisive moment for the Sudza direction. I want to remind you that in the coming days, temperatures are expected to drop below zero, down to -16 degrees Celsius. This will create the perfect conditions for the launch of another fast, lightning-speed, large-scale offensive from the Russian side. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel, give me a like, and have a great day. Bye-bye.